Hello, Honors Chemistry, and welcome to Chapter 6, Chemical Composition, right? Where this whole chapter is just really about how do we take a chemical formula, flashback to Chapter 5, right? And talk about it in the various different relationships that a chemical formula conveys, okay? Which is why, obviously, this builds on Chapter 5, right? And those two things are very much intertwined, right? So at a very, very microscopic level, right, we could just be talking about how much sodium, right, or how much chlorine, definitely not, how much sodium or chlorine is in a sample of sodium chloride, right, or going back to your book example, right, how much fluorine or how much chlorine is in a coolant sample, right, so this is somebody recharging the refrigerant in their car. So what percent of that compound is chlorine, so that way we can keep track of how much is being released into the environment, right? On a larger scale, right, here, we might not be talking about how much chlorine is in a sample, right? But if we look at a macro scale sample of like pounds or kilograms of dirt that we collect, right, how much of that dirt is going to contain the necessary iron, for example, that we want, right, after we do the series of chemical reactions to separate it, right? And is it worthwhile, right? Is it financially worthwhile to dig that iron out at that particular site based on what the percent composition of iron is, right? So anyway, percent composition, very important. Okay. Now, a quick note before we get into the rest of the chapter, right? Note that the mass of an ion is equal to the mass of a neutral atom, yes? So, for example, let's use iron, for example, right? So, iron has a mass of 55.85, and let's say AMU, right? The mass of an ion of iron, so this would be like Fe, right? If we had Fe3+, still 55.85 AMU, right? Because if we think about the difference between something that is neutral and something that is an ion, what's the only difference? Right, the difference is either the addition or the subtraction of a few electrons. The addition or subtraction of a few electrons. And electrons, while impactful in charge, right, not impactful in mass, right? We talked about in Chapter 3 how the mass of an electron is considered almost negligible next to the mass of a neutron and a proton, right? So just keep that tidbit in mind as we go through the math in this chapter. All right, finally, we get to section 6.2, where it's just a thinking experiment, right? Do you understand how a conversion factor works, right? Because if we want to count nails by the pound, really the key is a conversion factor, right? That relates nails and pounds, or it relates nails to something that can then be related to pounds, right? But really, it's just about conversion factors. Do we have the conversion factor? What's the key to this entire chapter? The right conversion factor. What's the key to much of chemistry? The right conversion factor, right? That's what all of this is about, right? So make sure you hold on to that, and in section 6.3, we'll get into some chemistry-specific conversion factors. All right. That we'll use for the rest of the school year. So make sure we're good here. All right. Thank you for listening. Be good, and I will see you.